Okay, we're about a little bit ahead of schedule, about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. So I hope that all the folks are here that are going to participate. But we do have Ashley Boyd, who is here from Artifact Puzzles. We have Janell, who of course has been here with us. And we also have Claire Schaffer, who talked earlier about her laser cutting. So again, these folks are here to share their knowledge. And I'm not sure if someone is here from Nervous Systems, but if they are, I hope you'll join us.
I'm contacting them right now, Joe.
Yep, yeah, and I have too. So
We're here. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, great, thank you. So yes, we can and see you, both of you. So so yes, hi, welcome everybody. We've got a great panel of folks here who've all been working in laser cutting for a short time or a long time. We've cut a number of puzzles. Nervous Systems, I had a chance to visit their workplace a few years ago, and they not only do puzzles, and I'm sorry if I keep saying systems, it's stuck in my head. It's Nervous System without the S. But anyways, I had a chance to visit their workplace a few years ago, and they do amazing designs, clothing, furniture, all kinds of stuff. So I'm sure they can talk about it when we get a chance. So Jessica, let's start with you. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business?
Sure. So I'm Jessica, and this is my partner, Jesse. And together we go by the name Nervous System. We have a design studio now based in the Catskill Mountains in New York. And we focus on computer-generated designs. We work in a lot of different media, including jigsaw puzzles, wooden jigsaw puzzles, but we also do jewelry design and software design, and we work on 3D printed organs. Like this thing behind me is a lung component that we designed. And we've been making puzzles for about 11 years now. We sort of specialize in one-of-a-kind puzzles. So we have software that we created that allows us to generate different cut patterns such that each cut for a certain series of puzzles can be unique.
We also work with like other digital artists that make things using computer programming to generate puzzles where every image is also one of a kind. And we also make our own images.
And we're currently working on a puzzle with Chris Yates, actually, which is going to be a series of one-of-a-kind puzzles in his style.
All right, Ashley. Oops, we may have just lost Ashley.
Oh, really? I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Your name disappeared from my screen. Hi, welcome.
Hi,
so
thank you.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Ashley Boyd. I work with Artifact Puzzles, which is kind of like a boutique wooden jigsaw laser cut puzzle company owned by Maya Gupta. I'm one of the puzzle makers. I work in the factory itself. I do a lot of like the cutting, the packaging and all that. And I also do puzzle design working with them as well. So there's a number of puzzles I've worked on for them that I designed the cut for. Yeah.
Great. And Claire, you were already here earlier, so please reintroduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm in Paris, France, and I just started making puzzles in December and January. So I've been experimenting with a lot of different techniques and materials, but all laser cut puzzles.
Great, thank you. And of course, Janell has been joining us. So Janell, you want to pop in and say hi?
Hi, my name is Janell. My puzzle company is 3 Cat Max because after 3 cats, once you hit 4 cats, you're officially a crazy cat person. There's nothing wrong with that. It just makes it official. So I'm going to keep it at 3 cats.
So I don't see any questions popping up quite yet, but maybe I'll start off and ask each of you if you want to share what brand of laser do you use? And Janell, how about you, since you're on the screen?
I use a Glowforge laser cutter. It's right there, right I guess you can't see my finger right there, right? And it's covered in stickers. It's about 40 watts, but it's a highly tuned laser so that it actually can cut like a 45 watt. I call it a prosumer model. That the price ranges from, I got it back in 2015 and it was a crowdsourced thing and it didn't get delivered until 2017. But nowadays, so I got it for about 1,500. Now it's about 3,000 for the basic level, which is the one that I actually suggest bothering with because everything else is just too expensive. But the highest one is 6,000.
Great. And Ashley, how about Artifact? Do you care to share that?
Yeah, we use the Epilogue laser cutters. We use both the minis and the helixes. They have different bed sizes. So minis are pretty good for like the 12 by 24. Helixes have like a larger bed. I offhand don't know the size, but it's definitely square based and a lot larger. So we can cut larger puzzles that way and gives us a little maneuverability. From what I understand, they're on the pricier end of things. So they're about 20K. Around abouts, maybe plus or minus that, but we have a relatively large factory operation, so it definitely is a good investment. They're solid machines.
Great. And while you're here, I don't know if you're noticing the chat window, but in the chat window, there's an awful lot of people that are excited to see someone from Artifact. So
hey, I'm excited to be here.
All right. Claire, how about you?
So I'm actually particular in that I don't have my own laser cutter. I use the Fab Labs in Paris. So there are 4 of them that I've been to, and I've used 80 watt laser cutters and 120 watt laser cutters. And I can definitely say that working on a Trotec 400 makes a huge difference compared to working even on a Trotec 360 or some of the 80 watt lasers in terms of cutting time and cutting quality. And for those of you who are interested in terms of pricing, I don't know how it is in the US, but in Paris, it's anywhere from 20 to 80 euro an hour to use a laser cutter in a Fab Lab.
Great, thank you. And Jesse and Jessica.
Our first laser was an Epilogue Helix, and we currently have 3 Trotec 360s, and we just got a Rayjet, which is sort of a budget brand Trotec that is a larger format, and it's 35 by 50 inches cutting bed.
Huge.
Yeah, so we use the Trotecs for their speed and sort of cleanliness. They cut very cleanly and they're very fast. We tested machines from the 3 main brands in the US are Universal, Epilogue, and Trotec. We found Trotec was the fastest, so that's what we invested in buying a bunch of those. And then the Rayjet we use for breaking down larger sheets into smaller sheets that we then put in the other lasers. If you have a problem where you get like 4 by 8 foot sheets of material are not going to fit in the fast, efficient laser cutters. So we needed another laser to be the intermediary between the big beast and the little beasts.
Wow, I didn't realize there was such a, well, I guess I do know that. There are some very large laser cutters for aircraft and all kinds of things that they're doing. So
Yeah.
I had something that was similar to probably what Claire mentioned is Fab Labs, and there's a makerspace in our town, or was a makerspace, and I went there and took classes on a Boss laser, and I do know some of the other manufacturers use Boss laser. Are you familiar with those? Or?
We are familiar with, I don't know about other people. We're familiar with it. We were considering buying our larger format laser from them, although I ran into some issues with getting them to cut test parts, and we couldn't fly down there for a demo because of COVID. So then I just sort of gave up on it. It's also Kern Laser is another US-based company that makes lasers. For large format, there's different options, but they're not going to be as inefficient at cutting small, tight curves as the lasers that use servo motors versus stepper motors. I think the Boss ones use stepper motors instead of servos.
Yeah, so we do have lots of questions coming in, so we'll try to get to those, but there's a comment here from Mark G, who's saying he's actually working in nervous system puzzle right now as he's watching. And someone actually, I believe this is for you, will you ever make coral mugs again?
I hope so. but we haven't set up a ceramics workshop on our new studio that we moved to 2 years ago at this point. So it could be another couple of years.
Then one more question's coming up for you too, is people want to know if you designed your own shirts as well.
No.
All right. So most of you guys have mentioned the power outputs of your laser, but there is a question here of how much energy do they consume? And so probably how many amps or how many watts does it take to run an 80-watt laser? Because I'm assuming there's extra energy that's being used to move your motor and turn the lights on and do other various things, run your processor.
I can kind of say for mine, we had the plug-in thing. It's like, what's your watts or something? I can't remember what that thing's called, but we plugged it up to the laser just to see, and it was like a light bulb. Not too bad, because basically it's a light. It's just super concentrated light.
Yep.
So for me, I don't calculate in electricity usage for my business. It's so small, it doesn't matter. But I don't produce a ton of puzzles also.
Yeah, I did get a chance to tour Liberty Puzzles, and they have a number of lasers. So, I'm sure that factors in, their electricity bill factors in. So there is another question, unless somebody else has a comment or any understanding of how much watt.
I think the exhaust for laser cutters typically uses more energy than the laser cutters. At least in our case, that's definitely true. We have a monster, huge, custom built blower that's sucking all the air out of the room that the lasers are in, and it uses a lot of energy compared to the lasers themselves.
Great, thank you. There is a question here.
I have a little comment about that too, actually. There was another question that talks about MDF. And so what I've noticed in Paris, the Fab Labs can be really rigorous about what materials you can put in the lasers. A lot of them refuse to have MDF as a material that goes into their lasers, except those that have a really high-end exhaust system because of the particles that it does release that are cancer causing.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So here's a question from George in South Africa. He wants to know, he has a problem where it looks like the laser jumps away from the cutting lines and makes marks on the wood. Any reason why this is happening?
Is it on the back of the puzzle, like the part touching the bed? If so, it could be a reflection from the surface that they're cutting it on. That's pretty common if you're not cutting raised up, to have a reflection of the aluminum cutting bed, but I don't know what specifically his issue is.
If it's the top, it might just be the design file.
Yeah, that's what came to my mind
Human
right
error
away.
first, machine error second.
And so another question for everyone is, what materials do you prefer? And someone would like to also know where you source them from. And then you can share that or not. And and I know at Nervous Systems, as you can see in the background, they use all kinds of materials, but what's the thickness of the wood that you use for your infinity puzzles?
It's around like 4.2 millimeters. We
Is
have
that Baltic
I know, it's like one thing of precision there. And we have it custom made for us by a guy in Chicago area. His company is called like Aircraft Plywood. Because we had a lot of trouble sourcing a plywood that doesn't have voids in the core. These plywoods are typically graded by the veneers and not by the core, except for aircraft grade plywood. But aircraft grade plywood typically uses exterior grade glue for aircraft, obviously, but we don't want that because it's more reflective. So we just have an aircraft grade plywood made for us with interior grade glue that this guy Jerome makes.
Yeah, I myself, on my hand cut puzzles, I like to use aircraft grade plywood because I'm a collector and I have some really old puzzles, and I don't want my puzzles falling apart at some time in the future. I do know one thing about aircraft grade. In order to be called aircraft grade, when they make the plywood, they have to take a sample and boil it for 4 hours, and then they try to bend it. If it delaminates, they can still sell it, but they can't sell it as aircraft grade. So And there's a marine grade as well. But yes, voids are a problem.
Yeah, you can't do that to our puzzles though, because they don't have exterior grade glue.
Yes.
Because yes, if you're cutting by hand, you don't care about the glue really, but the laser cares a lot about the glue.
Yeah. So I know by now we all know that Janell uses acrylic. So Ashley or Claire, do you want to talk about what you use?
Sure. I actually have gone through a couple of different materials, plastics, plywood, MDF, and plexiglass. In terms of plywood, I had a similar experience to what Janell was talking about yesterday, where actually after reading some of the articles by Nervous Systems about their sourcing of plywood, I purchased I purchased some fancy Baltic birch interior glue grade AAB, and on some of the lower powered laser cutters, the 80 watts, it just would not cut, or very difficult to cut it. And then I ended up going with just some cheap, like the equivalent of Home Depot in France, plywood, and that worked way better, at least for prototyping. In terms of acrylic, what I like about acrylic actually is that I can get it in a non-shiny version, matte version of acrylic, so you don't get the glare that you can get with some of the traditional plexiglass acrylics. And it doesn't burn on the edges, so you don't get the charcoal marks like you do with wood, which is very interesting. And as far as the recycled plastics go, those do get a little bit melty on the edges, so there is more post-production work sanding those down.
Great. Now, how about Ashley? How about Artifact?
I know that we basically have a privately sourced company that we work with. The material is plywood, and I think it's called a Pure Bond, and Pure Bond wood. And the reason we use it, when you cut through it, there's less chemicals and it's like formaldehyde free. And I think they've tested that. So that's generally the type of wood we use.
Yeah, I've understood from Jesse and Jessica before that, there's the VOCs, the volatile organic chemicals that are in the formaldehyde that people don't want to work with and don't want to have it in their exhaust system. But I also understand that tends to be more contaminants in the formaldehyde-based glues, and that disrupts the laser. Is this true? Well, they told me, so I assume it's true. But anybody want to comment on that? Okay. So we still have. There is a question here. What kinds of problems have you found cutting different kinds of materials? Wood versus plastic versus acrylic versus paper? Do you need different cutters for different materials?
Mainly metal for wood. To try metal, you need a different cutter. If you're cutting any like organic thing or plastic, you can use, as far as I know, the same cutter. I've cut paper on mine. That's actually part of my exchange puzzle that we'll talk about later. Watercolor paper, normal paper, copy paper, cardboard, acrylic, wood, plywood, solid wood that I actually know a guy with a sawmill that provides me with some 1/4 inch thick cedar that I can cut through. But the poplar from him, like rainbow poplar, I cannot get through at all. I can buy poplar at Home Depot or Lowe's and it cuts just fine. So I can't remember what I was getting at, but I know for plywood specifically, we did talk about this last night, right before closing, but like one of the biggest issues is freaking glitter. Like the different plywood companies will put different colored glitter so that they can ID their plywoods, and holy crap, any little fleck of glitter reflects because it's just light that you're cutting with. So it'll reflect off of that surface and not cut through the wood, which means you have to either try to get an X-Acto knife and hand cut it or trash the whole puzzle, which if you have a slower laser cutter, that's painful. And places to get them, because I wasn't paying attention to grab onto that conversation. The Home Depot does also do Pure Bond, Columbia Pure Bond. You can get it from their website. I think, Claire, that's probably exactly what you're talking about, as well as Ashley. except for you guys don't get it from Home Depot. The Columbia Pure Bond, it actually comes specifically in Glowforge laser bed size, which is pretty funny. You get like 12 by 20 inches specifically. You buy it from their website and you can pick it up online or in person. And for acrylic, as long as you're not trying to make your own plastic flat stuff that has all the cool colors in it, the best prices for acrylic for me is eaststreetplastics.com.
And so I have a question then with acrylics. Do you use extruded or cast acrylics?
Well, extruded is super duper stinky, and I'm pretty sure that all the mirror acrylic is extruded, but the other stuff tends to be cast. Extruded is also cheaper in general, but this, from what I remember, the website that I get the acrylic from, what I just said a second ago.
East Street.
Yeah, thank you. East Street Plastics. I'm pretty sure all their stuff is cast. And it's about $15 to $20 for shipping of a decent sized sheet. So if you were to get, say, 10 sheets of it, granted, if you're a wood cardboard or a wood cutter, you're not going to really want to cut acrylic with a saw blade. People have done it. It's not fun. Basically, it'll melt on itself if you try to use a saw blade on it.
Yeah, I
Unless you go super slow.
I don't recall which is which, but we do have puzzle cutters who are saw cutting acrylics, but they were very specific that one of them has a much lower melting point.
That'll be your extruded acrylic, has a much lower melting point, but it usually comes only in transparent. You have to actually go looking for makers that do colored extruded acrylics.
Yeah, so if you want to try it on a scroll saw, you definitely want to have cast. It's a disaster otherwise.
Yeah.
Just in
Okay,
case
so
anybody's thinking about buying a laser cutter and cutting random stuff in it, the most important thing is to make sure you're not cutting anything that like turns into hydrochloric acid or something like that. So like anything that contains vinyl, very bad to cut. So always check what you're cutting and that it's safe to burn it before you stick it in your machine.
yeah,
Absolutely no records.
I had a question about that, I guess, for the other people who are presenting. How do you make sure that the glue you're using to put on the images or the protective covering that you're putting on after an image doesn't contain anything that's dangerous to laser cut?
Generally contacting the manufacturer so you can make sure that there's nothing in there, and then like reading other websites. Like a lot of fab labs have websites and they have like a list of materials that are safe to use. They'll be like, styrene is dangerous to use, but whatever, some other plastic is fine. I'm blanking out on the name of plastics that are fine. Or certain types of rubber are safe to use, certain types are not safe to use. So
there's a
internet or asking manufacturers if you don't.
Yeah, and in the US, most manufacturers have to provide what they call a material safety data sheet on whatever they make. And so you can ask the manufacturer for the material data safety sheet, and that should give you the information you need.
You can test for the chlorine by getting a piece of copper hot and putting, if it's a plastic, sticking it into that plastic and getting some of it on top and then like putting it in a fire. And if it goes green, then that means it has chlorine in it. Don't use it.
All right. So there's a question here from Rebecca, and she wants to know, what is the coolest or most unusual thing that using a laser allows you to do?
I don't want to like take up all the questions, but I thought this one was really fun. Before I even had my own laser, I ran the makerspace at my college, and my sister was getting married, and I was the one that was responsible for the decorations, and I had no money. So because I was a college student, and it was a fall wedding. So what I did is I went around the campus and I found the coolest looking orangey red leaves. There's a lot of those up in Logan Mountains. Top of Utah is where I'm from. And I laser cut those. I lasered the name, the engagement details name, date of wedding, blah, 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 and then put them around as decoration and then tied them to little like treat bags so that everybody could have theirs. So they got crispy after like the first day. So you have to actually like store them in glycerin if you want them to stay soft. But it was a really silly thing to laser cut, and it smelled very strange too.
And Jesse and Jessica, I know that you guys, again, manufacture a wide range of products. Do you have anything super cool that I saw a dress in your shop one time?
Jessica has laser cut some fabric to make clothing, which is cool. I mean, we do a lot of stuff with puzzles like that you would be difficult to make if they were hand cut. So like one of the puzzles we make is this infinite galaxy puzzle, which is a double-sided puzzle, which connects to itself with a flip. So the left side connects to the right side, but the pieces flip over as they move so that the top and the bottom surface make one continuous image. So there isn't really a top of the puzzle and the bottom of the puzzle. Every time you put it together, different parts of the puzzle will.
You made a Mobius strip into a puzzle?
It's a Klein bottle, actually, but
Okay,
Klein bottle is like sort of like a double Mobius strip, sort of. I mean,
Cool.
not technically, but if you're thinking about it.
And then like, it's like basically things that you can do with exact precision that you can't do. Like in the question, one of the things they mentioned is like a puzzle within a puzzle, which is something that we've done where there's like a subset of pieces within the puzzle that form their own puzzle. Or one of the things that we haven't done, and which people do by hand, but it makes it a lot easier to do like stacked puzzles where different parts of the stack interact in different ways. It's not something that we've done. One of our customers who buys custom puzzles from us made a puzzle like that.
All right, fun stuff. I had skipped over a question earlier from Dan. Dan wanted to know what you can do. Is there tips on improving your fan system, the noise reduction, anything else with the associated manufacturing process?
We have infinite opinions about this. I don't know if other people also have opinions, but.
Well, so we have like a super powerful exhaust. It's like way overpowered to the point where it like creates significant negative pressure in the room with the lasers to keep things very clean.
But
and
sorry, just top level
Okay.
tips. Only use rigid ducting. Don't use any sort of flexible ducting. It has more vibrations. It's going to make more noise. If you can, locate your blower either outside or in a soundproof room separate from the room that you're in. We recently have done an insane thing, which I don't yet know if I would recommend to anybody else, but we've created a closed looped air system where we only bring in air from the outside and feed it to the lasers such that we're not sucking out our conditioned air. But it does create some additional challenges with like the air going into the lasers is more humid. So I'm not yet sure how I feel about that. So it leads to like more buildup of wood residue in the laser bed, but it's helping our energy bills go way down, which is good.
We also use like these ducting mufflers, which is basically like a double thing of ducting where there's kind of a eggshell foam layer in between. And those work pretty well. They work by like reducing the turbulence of the air in the ducting.
Okay, those are our tips.
All right, and is the fan that drives that, do you get it external or Ashley, do you have comments?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, we have a professionally installed ventilation system. I don't know the nuances, but I do know that it basically does suck in air from outside because we want to make sure, like we have IQ air filters and just making sure that the air quality inside is at least like 50 or below. Generally, it's in the green. It's usually like 13. It's a very good system we have. But we did have problems with humidity. And what we did is we have a whole bunch of dehumidifiers in certain locations that we figured out was creating some issues, and that seemed to solve it right away.
All right, and have another question here one that's specific to you, Ashley, is that someone mentions that they find burn marks on the back of artifact puzzles, and they wondered if you could comment on that.
Yeah, well, we basically produce a lot of puzzles per day, like at least like 200 to 300, like it's a pretty large operation, and we have multiple laser cutters running. In general, we really focus on the front. The image itself is pristine. Sometimes there are burn marks on the other side, depending on if the speed and power for whatever reason is a little bit stronger than normal, but it cuts through properly and the image looks all right. So there will be times where there might be some burn marks on the back, but perfectly fine puzzle. It's too expensive just to toss those puzzles. So it's just a part of the process in general.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. If you have to throw away a lot of what you produce, then the prices are going to go way up.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's another question that I'm not sure I understand, but it's for nervous system, and it's a question about a nozzle that you have designed.
Yeah.
I need to scroll down to find this question.
Well, so we make a custom nozzle that we use in our lasers, and the idea is basically to make the airflow more laminar. The nozzles on Trotex I find not to be that great. Well, I'll just talk about in general the idea here. So all lasers have an air assist, which is like compressed air, maybe not all lasers, but compressed air that gets blown on the cut. And there's two types of air assists. There's like the air assist that at least used to be on epilogue helixes and other epilogues, which is sort of blows kind of from the side. And there's what's called the coaxial air assist, which is in line with the laser. And coaxial air assists are generally much better because they blow exactly into the cut and help make a cleaner cut. And then in addition to that, you want the idea of the air assist is to sort of remove any smoke and particulate efficiently from the cut as quickly as possible. But you're also heating things up and potentially lighting them on fire. So what you don't want your air assist to do is you don't want your air assist to be like blowing on a fire and making it flare up. And so that's sort of why I made this custom nozzle, which has sort of more laminar airflow, which basically means the airflow is more efficient at removing stuff from the cut quickly without just blowing a lot of air that blows around and stokes a fire.
Just that the short explanation of why we even bother with this, it's in order to get a cleaner cut on the back side of the puzzle, we cut image side down with the back side facing up, but we want to have as tight of a curve on that side as possible. Normally the side you cut down in the laser will have a tighter curve because you're just barely cutting through there, whereas the side that's facing up in the laser, you're powering through that. So you have a wider cut mark on that side. Using this tighter thing has allowed us to get a tighter curve on the top and also have a cleaner backside without having to finish the back or having to wipe it down. So that's sort of our goal in making this different nozzle.
So you mentioned that you designed it to get a more laminar flow versus turbulent flow, and what was the effect of that?
I mean, it's like not super dramatic or anything. It's not like before these were like looked like crap and now they're amazing. But you know, every little bit helps and it makes
every little bit helps.
like we have a coating that we put on our puzzles, and then we wipe the puzzles after they're cut, and there's much less soot on the image after it's cut since we switch nozzles, which means they're just easier to wipe, and your things you're wiping with get less dirty throughout the day, etc.
All right, thank you. Now there is a comment here from someone who just says that they have a laser cutter that they use to decorate their toast. So I guess that's getting out there. It's probably a pretty expensive way to decorate your toast.
I have a quick
Many-
question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was wondering, I guess this is more for Ashley and Jessica, how do y'all feel about the entry of all of the like cheap wooden laser cut UV printed colorful animal puzzles on the market? Is that a good thing for wooden puzzles in general because it's showing more people that there are puzzles out there, or is it a bad thing because of the quality?
I don't have any problems with there being cheap UV printed colorful puzzles, but I have a problem with the fact that there's like multiple factories in China that are copying every single puzzle that we make. Like literally 1 to 2 days after we release a puzzle, they have copied it from photographs, like traced the cut, are producing an identical puzzle under the same name and buy Google ads and keywords to advertise their puzzle over our puzzle. And then people think they're buying our puzzle and they receive it and it's like cheap and the image is peeling off or it's poorly made or it doesn't look like what it is. And then I get emails from angry people being like, I bought the herding cats puzzle and it was terrible. And it's not even one we made or that we made any money from. So that's what I have a problem with, is that it seems to go hand in hand with the knockoff puzzles, which are totally lacking in any creativity and are just like stealing business from us, which I find very frustrating, but there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, this may be anecdotal information or evidence, but I do see in the Facebook wooden puzzles group, you know, there's a lot of people who've been discovering wooden puzzles and going out and buying them. And they've been, you know, coming across these very cheap ones that disappoint them. And over time, more and more people are pointing them to the legitimate places like Nervous System and Artifact and Janell and Liberty and so on, saying, yeah, don't buy them from these companies because they are poor imitations in quality and design. So, I as people learn, you know, I hope everybody reverts back to making sure they buy them from the correct source. And again, yeah, your infinity puzzles been associated with you know, for several years now, and people think there's something brand new that China invented. So I commented once on my website about searching patents, and you know, as I searched for patents related to jigsaw puzzles, that you know, that I found quite a few patents out of China that apparently they invented the jigsaw puzzle and within the last 10 years. So. So any other comments on as far as you know, competing with these low cost knockoffs? Ashley, comments?
Yeah, I was going to say it is very disheartening. We've definitely had puzzle images. So we commission artists directly. So it's stealing from those artists, like their image, and then stealing from the design. I will say for what helps with Artifact is we have unique puzzle cuts, puzzle designs for every single puzzle. We pride ourselves on that, like their own like piece of artwork made by a designer. So it's a little bit harder, I think, for them to get it exactly knocked off because they'd have to get a physical copy of it and then copy from there. So it is theoretically possible if they got every single puzzle and then like kind of traced from that. But even then I saw one, somebody posted a wooden puzzle from APAC with like a strange title, and it was very confusing for me because it was like, oh, that's definitely, we've worked with APAC before and that should be an Artifact puzzle, but I've seen pretty much every puzzle we've made. Like I got very confused and I looked into it. I was like, oh, okay, I found it on the Alibaba website where they came from, and I noticed that the cut was similar but not exactly the same because they had to kind of recreate it by eye. So of course they just didn't get the same design. And I think what helps is that we do have very unique designs like that. Like it's kind of hard to completely knock off.
We've seen puzzles where we like could literally find the photograph that it was copied from because the part of the image that is like sort of blurry and out of focus, the cut there makes absolutely no sense. It's like they like either by hand or automatically traced the cut from a photograph, and then in that part that like it wasn't clear, they just sort of like made up gibberish where the pieces like literally make no sense.
It has made me like almost not want to publish photos of the complete puzzle on the internet. Like I love showing it, that way people can like see how cool it is and they can buy it and know what to expect. But on the other hand, if I didn't publish the complete photos of the puzzles, it'd be a lot harder for people to be copying them. So that I feel conflicted about that.
Maybe you should publish a photo of something that's ridiculously hard or ridiculous and let them try to copy it. Don't actually sell any. All right, let me go back. There's a couple questions here. I'm going to kind of combine them. And let me see if I can find them. Sorry, I'm scrolling around here. You know, one is kind of, have you ever come up with an idea that you thought might be your next hot seller and it just did not work? Guess we've got a very creative bunch here. I guess that's never occurred or never happened for any of these folks.
Do we really want to admit that?
We made some miniature puzzles for like the holiday season. They weren't particularly popular. I thought I thought more people would buy them like just because to have like a cheap puzzle that you could give as a holiday gift, but they weren't like, we didn't sell more of them than we did of like more expensive puzzles. It was not particularly successful. Maybe it's because they were kind of generic. They were just like photographs of like a mushroom and a flower and not as unique as some of our other designs.
This isn't exactly the same thing as the question, but we started making puzzles in like 2000, or selling puzzles in 2012. And like for 4 or 5 years, they were basically just like a thing that we made because I was really excited about them and I thought they were cool. And like no one gave a shit about our puzzles at all. And now they're like the main part of our business.
Yeah. There's a comment here from Chris Yates, you know, and Chris is a puzzle cutter. I'm sure you're familiar with him, but Chris mentions that he's had the problem of people knocking off his designs. So he makes sure that when he takes his photo, they're at an angle. Makes it a little bit harder for them to copy. Yeah. You know, I do know one thing. In my very first experience with a laser puzzle, I came across a Liberty puzzle in a place called Games People Play in Cambridge. And it was selling for, at that time, you know, more than 2 decades ago, I think. I was fascinated with it and I bought it and took it home and opened it up and was overwhelmed by the smell of smoke. And there was probably at least 30 pieces that were broken in there because there were some very narrow pieces, and the burn from the laser burned through from one side and burned through from the other side and left very little wood left there, you know, solid wood left there. And I know over time they have greatly improved that process. And do you have any thoughts about that, tips on that? You know, how do you keep your figure pieces and so on from actually, you know, if you want fine details in the figure pieces, how do they not get burned too much and become very fragile?
I can speak to that. I mean, there's a lot of iteration and a lot of like hands-on experience. You have to have like a certain amount of mass, like it has to be about 1 inch by 1 inch. So like circular area, like make sure it's in that amount and there's not too many like tendrils coming out. So you kind of have to make it kind of cartoony. And then we test each piece like coming out. Like we do a lot of stress testing, like a puzzle design will take about a month of like back and forth with like other people like coming in and out, like just checking it themselves. We learned that wishboning is like a big deal. So like wishboning is when you kind of have like a huge amount of mass here, a huge amount of mass here, and there's a U shape, and it just wishbones like cut. Like we make sure not to have any whimsies with that have like that kind of shape to them. Although sometimes if they have enough mass and thickness in the middle, then it's perfectly fine. So we kind of stress test each piece and make sure, especially in the beginning design process. Human figures especially are a little bit like, you kind of have to just do a lot of whimsies in general. Like we kind of start with the whimsy design first and we test cut those whimsies just to make sure like they're pretty solid. And you learn like human figures like are especially a little problematic because you can get a lot of little details like sticking out and those will just snap off. But we learned if you just kind of add more mass to them and just keep testing and reiterating, then you can kind of figure out, okay, what works and what doesn't that way. Birds are kind of problematic because they always have like the long necks and the long tails and they kind of create that wishbone effect again. So you got to kind of thicken those out and kind of play the line of too cartoony or realistic, like trying to more on the side of cartoony to keep it, but still looking like the image. I guess my biggest feedback is like stress testing and really thinking about the robustness of each whimsy piece is really helpful.
Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
definitely like on that sort of like cartoony end, like because you're sort of working in a computer when you're making laser cut puzzles, like you look at something in a computer and you think like it looks bad because like you've made it too chunky or something. But when you actually translate it into a puzzle piece, it still like looks pretty good. So you can like, you want like your natural inclination is to try to make something realistic. Like if you're making a figure of a dog or something and you want it to look realistic like a dog, you like, its tail is extremely thin, but you can actually like go pretty cartoony. And when you look at it in the computer, you think like, this doesn't make any sense. But when you look at it as a puzzle piece, you're like, this is like indistinguishable from what it was before.
Okay. So here's a question from Anne for everyone. And she mentions that the boom in puzzle sales during the pandemic, and she's wondering, how were you affected by that boom, and are sales starting to taper off yet?
Sales have definitely tapered off back to more normal levels for us. I don't know for the other people can speak for them. We had sort of like Christmas level sales like all year during the pandemic year, which is unusual. Normally, like, the beginning of the year is pretty slow and it gets busier towards the end of the year when we sell like most of what we sell the whole year. We sell in November and December. But COVID year, it was crazy the whole year. But now it's definitely more manageable. It's getting back to like normal sort of sales.
It might even be like extra low now. Normally the summer is not a time where people are like, I'm going to stay inside and do jigsaw puzzles. And I think like, especially this summer, everybody's like, I can finally go places. So, not super jigsaw puzzle time.
And before we move on to other folks answering the same question, I'll actually just add an addendum to that question is what role did social media play in the boom for you?
I don't think that it played that much of a role in the boom for us. We actually didn't really release any new, did we release any new puzzle during, but that was prior to COVID, wasn't it?
No. Was it?
We don't know. We haven't,
Okay.
we moved to a new studio and I was pregnant and just had a baby. So like we were pretty busy with other things during the COVID time and we didn't totally do a lot of social media promotion in our studio.
Great, thanks. Janelle, you've been quiet. What do you say about this?
First, about the craziness of puzzle sales. So I've never had like insane amounts of puzzle sales, like crazy like that. I do know somebody else who had a Glowforge that does puzzles specifically, and he was like absolutely off the wall bonkers. His are at a much lower price point than my puzzles are though. But I did have an Etsy store also along with my normal store, and I was getting like 5 or 6 orders a week, which was really cool. But since, I don't know, about 8 months or so, it just stopped. Etsy changed some of their stuff. They made it so you had to pay extra, not originally, but they would take more off the top if you sold a puzzle or sold any item that they had advertised outside of their website. And that pissed off a lot of people on Etsy, the makers and sellers. And yeah, Etsy fees keep climbing and they're just not worth it for me anymore. So I just closed up my shop and I was just like, whatever. Social media wise, so I'd say Facebook for puzzles is probably more relevant than Instagram. I've had a couple of people find me through Instagram who end up sharing their stuff through word of mouth or sending my puzzles to their friends. Like specifically, I know Tammy and Yvonne are 2 really good friends, and Tammy had sent some of my puzzles to Yvonne, and now Yvonne's got like all of my puzzles. So, but I think she's actually here too. So, but overall, like Instagram I wouldn't even bother with anymore. I posted a couple stories yesterday and I had like 4 people view them. And I was just like, I've got 700 followers. Whoop-de-doo. Like 4 people viewed my stories. It's not even worth my time to do it. It takes so much away from being creative. So I try to, like, I like Chris's way to do social media where it's like, he might hit a few posts like every couple of days, but he's not super focused on doing that.
Okay, Claire, how about you?
I guess I'll just bounce off of what Janelle was saying. What I've heard is that on Instagram, you can get about 3% of your community to purchase items. So that means you need a pretty darn big community of followers to be getting sales based on Instagram. And on Etsy, I've really just started selling. Like I said, I started making puzzles very recently, and Etsy takes a 5% cut on whatever you sell and on shipping fees. So it can get up there pretty quickly.
Great. And Ashley?
I think Artifact had a pretty good reputation even before the pandemic. So people kind of had, through word of mouth, known about us for a while. I think it started back in 2007 with Maya starting it all off. So it'd been growing for a while. We definitely had, basically in March, we were kind of broadsided with the pandemic, because usually we kind of had a moment where we can, like, after the Christmas season, like kind of calm down a little bit, and then suddenly the pandemic hit and it was like Christmas season all over again. So we actually got hit pretty hard where things were selling out and we had to bring more, like, be like, guys, we got to work, like, keep going. Like, we had to make a lot more, but then we also had to balance like being safe with COVID and everything. So we were really good about that. We already had the N95 masks and it was well ventilated, and we had doors, like just the garage doors open anytime anybody was in there. And we limited it to like 1 to 2 people at a time, like generally 24/7 going. So we were able to get our stock back up that way. In terms of social media, I've noticed that Facebook has been pretty good in driving traffic, it seems. Instagram, we have an Instagram account. I'm not sure how great it is in bringing a lot of business, but it's good to have that presence. So I think it's good to at least have an account and update it every once in a while. It doesn't hurt. Reddit's been pretty good, and I've noticed them sharing some wooden puzzles every once in a while with us mixed in, and I think that's gotten some intrigue from customers. That's about what I got to say about social media, but.
All right. I do know from conversations I've had with one manufacturer that they were in a state that was in a forced lockdown. So they were not allowed to bring their employees in. So as sales started to skyrocket, they were shut down, basically, or virtually shut down. And I guess I shouldn't use that term in this meeting, but they were shut down, and they kind of weren't able to take as much advantage of the boom as some of the other companies were. Okay, I don't know. I don't think I've missed any questions here. And there is a comment from Natalia that says the most important thing about social media is if you do puzzles, you have no time for content. So if you love doing puzzles, you're not going to be on your computer looking for social media ads of puzzles.
So I did notice one comment about the company Unidragon, which makes some really beautiful puzzles if you can get them actually from them. Now, my spouse works for the Air Force, and I can't buy things from Russia, so I haven't got any Unidragon puzzles. But I really wonder what's going on there. Is it just that Chinese companies are copying them immediately? Or I really wonder if they're selling the puzzle design and the digital stuff, the actual cutting design.
Well, I do know that, again, from private conversations I've had with some individuals, and I know that no, they are not, and Jesse and Jessica comment on, they are not being reimbursed when people steal their designs. And I know that, Wentworth in England has had a number of their designs copied. I've seen Unidragon and others, many others that, almost exact copies. You'd have to look at them long and hard to be able to see that, they didn't copy the same image. So, yeah, that does occur.
I have a
Let's
quick
bring it up.
question. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
A quick question for Ashley here. How do y'all at Artifact protect your puzzles when cutting? The nervous systems people said they cut face down and they put a protective coat on it. Janelle said that she uses protective tape. What do y'all do at Artifact?
Unfortunately, I cannot comment on that.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No problem. There are, you guys have all worked long and hard to develop your techniques, and it's, perfectly all right not to give away the the secrets. All right, well, I think we can wrap up early. I definitely want to thank all of the presenters and want to thank all the people who submitted questions. And I think we are ready to roll into, I believe we're up for a break or.
Yeah, Joe, I think we want to keep on the same schedule for 5 o'clock for the
Okay,
change.
so. So we'll just take a break right now.
We're going to take a quick break. It's 4:46 Eastern time. In 14 or 15 minutes or so, we'll be back with the final event, the big Pagey Elliott Jigsaw Puzzle Exchange. And don't forget, go to the sales page